For those of you joining us tonight on episode 001, I want to thank you. This is Doc This, the #1 space for honing your craft. Tonight we have Topher Cochran, director-producer of Chasing Bubbles. Chasing Bubbles is an amazing adventure documentary about Alex Russ, an Indiana boy who sails the globe and gets very lost in the process. Topher released this video to YouTube in September, a very unique form of distribution, and already has 210,000 organic views. Let's talk to him and learn a little bit more about how he archived, story build, dealt with evolving stories, and ultimately his distribution to YouTube. Where do you live? You live in downtown Chicago? Or?
Yeah. I live in, my neighborhood's called Uptown, but I live in downtown Chicago relatively.
I love Chicago. I was kind of like drawn in initially by kind of the adventure of it, but in the end, I really started being a little blown away by the character of Alex.
Yeah, he was a very charismatic guy.
How did you come in contact with him?
I knew him socially. We had friends in common. I met him at a party. I mean, in real life, he was kind of a character. I mean, he sort of created a persona for himself, and he tried to live as large as he could. But I mean, for me, he was a kind of a Midwestern guy. I mean, he went to Purdue. He liked to party. He had girlfriends. I mean, we were about the same age, so I related to him on a basic level. I mean, we were friends.
Were there any times where you felt conflicted by kind of some of the footage you were showing or parts of the story that you were telling, and how did you kind of work through that stuff?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, there's some heavy stuff in there, I mean, he had personality flaws, it's a pretty tragic ending to the movie. So I mean, my natural instinct or my inclination is to sort of tell the whole story. And what I sort of told his family was that in order to make him relatable as a character to people, you're going to have to ground him as a real person or nobody be able to relate to him. I mean, it'd be really easy for people to sort of distance themselves from the story by saying to themselves, oh, this guy's different from me. He was rich, or he was a sailor, or he was a yacht owner, or he was from some crazy alien culture that I can't understand. But I wanted to be able to say, no, he was just a regular kid. He was just a regular guy. He, had issues. He struggled with, some issues of self with his dad having died, and had some relationship troubles with lots of different girlfriends that he had, and certainly wasn't rich. He had humble beginnings and figured out how to scrap together money and lived very leanly. He lived very efficiently. He's very frugal. He'd live out of a van, or he would stay with friends and scrap money together so that he could put all of his money towards experiences and adventures. And I kind of wanted to ground all that stuff so that people would be able to relate to him. It wouldn't be an interesting story to me if it's just about a young guy who owns a yacht. I mean, that sounds like a douchey character, like an evil villain from a John Hughes movie or something.
Kind of going back to the archive element of this, how much footage did you end up with?
I think we had 100 hours. I don't know exactly. I think about probably 100 hours.
And did you have any techniques? Did you use boards? Did you kind of?
Yeah, we did have a board. The editor transcribed all the interviews and then searched through B-roll to match B-roll to interviews. So if we had a paper edit, and if in that audio edit the narrative is talking about surfing, we would try to scrub through all the B-roll and try to find surfing imagery. And if you saw the movie, there's a few holes where we just couldn't find anything. So there's 3 places in the movie where I have 2D animation. And I would have done more of that if I could, And there's lots of places in the movie. One of the early concepts I had, actually when I pitched the movie to Alex back in, it was like Halloween 2013, I think, or November 2013, I pitched him the idea of having these maps, these moving 2-dimensional maps that sort of help tell the story, because I knew that the story was very geographic and we'd want to be bouncing from one place to another. So I visualized the idea of those maps. It was a grander vision when I pitched it to him. I imagined sort of a Maya 3D model of Bubbles the boat, and an intro shot of a globe spinning over a white cyc, and then a dolly and camera into the globe to introduce those moving map sequences. But we never ended up executing all that because I made it, I made this movie sort of by the seat of my pants,
I can relate 100% just thinking through this archivally, actually speaking to your graphics, like I thought they worked well. And it actually helped me because I got tons of spots where it's like, how do I sew this part of the story to that part of the story? Like there's this huge gap, You had the benefit of going back and kind of piecing together interviews that would drive the story. And I was fascinated, and you caught me off guard because I was like, I didn't expect him to kind of disappear and die because he was actually in the film. But were there parts in there because of the sporadic nature of how he gathered footage where you were just like, how are we going to marry that to this in the story? And I don't know if you have techniques or thoughts or times where you're just like, what, I just turned it off. I mean, do you have thoughts on that?
My process is I research the subject, I do a little pre-interview, which is really just a lunch or a cup of coffee. I try not to ask too many questions, but I sort of try to gauge the person a little bit. I don't ask them any hard questions because I don't want to have to ask them the same questions again on camera. Then we do a primary initial interview and I shoot for 6 hours and I ask them all these questions in the outline, and there's usually sub-questions and we go down all these rabbit holes. And then I'll do a paper edit and gather B-roll. And then I'll do a secondary interview months later when I start to have a paper edit and I start to know what the structure is. Then I can use that secondary edit to sort of fill gaps in my narrative. And then we'll edit the movie. And then when we have that rough cut, which is really just video footage, it just consists of video footage and audio edit at that point, then I start to imagine what kinds of fun other tools of cinema we can use. If it's going to be animation, if it's going to be voiceover edit, if it's going to be more footage that I shoot or some sort of staged thing, depending what the subject matter is. The third step is sort of bridging those gaps with either a secondary edit or animations or voiceover. But it's an organic thing. Like like I don't start the thing knowing what it's going to be about.
Narrowing it down, I mean, I guess I have 3 last questions. The first one is revolves around how your story changed with Christopher and how you dealt with it. I mean, that's a pretty big change, and you've got the family to consider at some level. There's a lot of emotions, and you're kind of how did you deal with that change when you found out that he passed?
When Alex
died.
Well, it was incredibly sad. It was a kind of a gut punch, and we responded by putting the movie down, I put the project down for a little while. Right when he died, I quickly strung together a bunch of B-roll that I had to play at his memorial and to put on the internet as a memorial. But then I didn't do anything with the project for months, and maybe six months passed before I made that little trailer, and I tinkered with it a little bit. I used that trailer as sort of like a proof of concept to the family and his friends, and they were actually huge help. They were great because they wanted the movie made more than anyone. So his brothers and his mother were super helpful with getting financing for the movie, and they gave me total access to their family and his life story and everything. So I don't have anything on paper. It was just they were just really forthcoming. We just kind of worked as a team. But it took me a while. I mean, he died. I finished the movie 3 years later or 2 years later or something.
I'm curious on your distribution plan. Did you?
There isn't one.
No, and did you guys go straight? Because my history with you is what I saw on Vimeo.
I financed it with sort of public help. We had a lot of people gave money, and the idea was never to make any money off of it. The idea was always just to sort of make a cool piece. So when I raised money, I promised people during the financing process in the Kickstarter video that we'd give it away for free. And also, it seemed the easiest way. I mean, I just wanted people to watch it. So I wanted to make it as easy to watch as possible. And I mean, YouTube is very social and Vimeo is also very shareable. So, I mean, those are just like the way I make the movie. I mean, it's what is available to me. I mean, there's no real mystery about it. I mean, it's the easiest. I don't know anyone who works for Netflix, so I just uploaded it to YouTube. You know what I mean? A lot of people said, why don't you put it on Netflix? I say, sure. If you know anyone who works at Netflix, I'd be happy to give them the movie to put up on Netflix. I'd want to be able to put it back up on YouTube after their contract expired or after they were no longer having it, willing to have it streaming or whatever. But I mean, I'm a creature of necessity and availability. I mean, I like making movies. That's what I've always wanted to do, but I use the tools I have at my disposal. I mean, and certainly I dream big. I come up with ideas that I can't execute, but as time goes by, I think of new. I mean, my plan was always just to sort of make this as available as possible.
Yeah, no, I can relate so much with that, and that's part of the reason that kind of has inspired me, kind of like trying to reach out to filmmakers in the community and trying to build more of a network. last question I'll ask for you, your new project, I don't know if you want to, if you have any kind of, if you want to talk about it or promote it or kind of put it out there or tease it. I don't know if you got a teaser out there or anything, any way I can promote that for you.
I don't. We just started production on it. It's a documentary about a guy called Webb Childs. I don't have a title for it. Just my notes about it just say Webb Childs Film Project. He's a writer and an adventurer. He's a sailor and philosopher, and he's an old guy, and he's really a really interesting guy. He's a minimalist, which I think is really cool. So I want to explore some of that stuff.
Well, hey, have a good evening, and thanks again for your time.
You too. Thank you. Thanks for talking.
Guys, if this is your first episode with us, thank you so much for joining us. I want you to join, like, follow, tweet, retweet, connect. Who doesn't? Everyone wants a little love out there, but I'm trying to grow a specific part of the community, documentary filmmakers. So join us, follow us, help us grow, help us help each other out in the process.
Thank you, share. Tap this.